Hi, I'm Tim Robinson, Editor-in-Chief of AEROSPACE, and with me is Deputy Editor Steve Bridgewater.
Hi guys.
And Features Editor Jack Richardson.
Hello.
Welcome to another episode of AEROSPACE NOTAM, your podcast and videocast looking at global aviation, aerospace and space news and what we have upcoming in the next issue of AEROSPACE, April 2025. In the magazine, we cover everything from GA to spaceflight, from airliners to airports, from air law to eVTOLs, and obviously defence, which is good actually because we haven't got a message from our sponsor. So this episode of the RAS podcast, NOTAM, is proudly brought to you by Lockheed Martin, pioneering the future of aerospace, defence and security. With a focus on delivering all domain, mission solutions and transformation technologies, Lockheed Martin is providing unmatched capabilities and interoperability for the UK and allied militaries around the world. Learn more at lockheedmartin.com. So great to have them on board as a sponsor for this podcast. And where have we been in this past month? Who wants to go first? Jack, you've been at Farnborough, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I went to the Farnborough International Space Show. This was very, very interesting. All sorts to see, from conglomerates like Rolls-Royce with their micro-nuclear reactor concepts down to startups looking at more innovative ways and novel ways of powering both space flight and providing electricity on Earth. So yes, there was a lot of talk about issues such as how we ensure redundancy in space and make sure the necessary infrastructure can be built on Earth in the form of spaceports.
So was that a UK show, or were there international exhibitors there as well?
International as well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So key question then, who's going to launch from the UK first?
They wouldn't be drawn on that, but
everybody knows it was Wallace and Gromit. Years ago, nobody's talking about this. Years ago, a man from Yorkshire put a rocket into space, and it's been airbrushed from history.
And Button Moon and the clangers.
That is true.
Yeah, practice. So, okay, what about you, Steve? You've been on the radio.
I've been on radio. I was on BBC Radio 2 a couple of weeks ago, the coveted 20 past 5 in the midnight slot. 20 past midnight slot, on OJ Borge's show. So for those who don't know, OJ Borge has a segment of his show called Midnight Mastermind, and I was invited on as the guest to go and quiz him on questions about famous female aviators, so British female aviators. So question on who's the first British woman in space?
Helen Sharman.
Well done. Who was the first British woman to get a pilot's licence?
Ooh, that's more tricky. You put us on the spot here.
I am. That was Hilda Hewlett.
Hilda, yes.
Also the first woman to get a speeding ticket.
Really?
So questions along those lines. He did very well, actually, OJ. Credit where credit's due. He doesn't know who the guest is going to be. You go on, you introduce yourself and the subject, and he has the space of one song to go away and cram as much information as he can. I did wonder whether it was all staged, but having done it, I can say he did not know beforehand, and he got 2 out of 3 right.
Brilliant. Okay, it's fantastic. So they were, for me, we had the single pilot ops conference here at the Society. I briefly put my hand around there for a couple of sessions. That was a very interesting conference. More on that later. And we also hosted a digitisation in defence roundtable, which was absolutely fascinating. Really, really interesting. Digitisation, digital engineering, obviously, it's a hot topic. Kind of faster, cheaper. AI, model-based systems engineering. But one thing that really kind of jumped out of that is first digitally designed aircraft. What would you think of that? Most people would probably go 777.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah,
English Electric Lightning. One of the first computers built in Britain. Pilot Ace, designed by Alan Turing, and was used to design the Lightning's wing.
I wonder how big that computer was.
Yeah. So they are. There's a factoid for you.
Bigger than this room.
So we are on to the news roundup, and what a month of news this has been. Where
Cue nervous laughing from the editorial team.
Where do we start? So I mean, we also got some news in the magazine, and there's breaking news happening every day that we're just trying to keep on top with, and that's sort of trying to keep up on top of it. Just ourselves, let alone kind of write about it. Obviously, the big one here that's broken in the last 48 hours, something like that, is obviously the US strike plans being leaked to a journalist. So obviously Signalgate, as they're calling it. Many of you will probably be familiar with it. There was a Pentagon, obviously a secret or a semi-secret chat group going on discussing plans to strike the Houthis. It's a whole kettle of fish there. If you want to go into it, there on the political and the security and the cyber security and implications. Just looking at it though from the aviation point of view, is the reaction from professional aviators, I think, has been one of just complete shock. Of having fairly detailed strike plans put out there on a insecure platform. And obviously it wasn't things like target coordinates or actually tail numbers of the aircraft, but it was pretty close. And it had time on target and launch times. And obviously time on target, that allows enemies to go, oh right, well somebody's coming, then we can prepare an ambush. Luckily, it's the Houthis who haven't got much of a surface-to-air capability. They have targeted coalition jets, so they have got some sort of SAMs there, and launch times. And if you're doing launching from an aircraft carrier, you've got to steer into the wind. So the Houthis have been launching ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones at US warships, coalition warships in the Red Sea, and telling someone that the launch time is X means that if you know roughly where the carrier group is, and they've been targeting the carrier group, then it's going in a certain direction. It's going to make targeting the ballistic missiles much easier. So whole thing there. There's serious lessons to be learned. Obviously, I think people probably agree it was accidental. And there's also implications for Allied information sharing as well. There were actually RAF tankers supporting this mission. So there were Voyagers. It looks like there were Voyagers out there. They were out on ADSB. They went dark over turned off their ADSB over the Red Sea. But they looked like they were supporting US Navy because that's what we do. So going forward, there are sort of serious questions there in terms of the allies and things are happening in multinational CAOCs, command centres. How much information do we now pass up the food chain, out of the command chain? Our political leaders are asking for information on what we're doing, timings, etc. But is this sort of stuff? Could it put our war fighters, people at the tip of the spear, in danger? So I mean that's as much as we can sort of say about it. Steve, what about you? What's called your right?
I've got a helicopter story. It is vaguely GA. Helitech, Heli Expo, been rebranded this year as Verticon, which I can't say without an American accent, as Verticon. 2 new helicopters unveiled. Big surprise. First one from Robinson Helicopters. They've unveiled the R88, which is the biggest helicopter they've ever created. It's a 10-seater. Looks very similar to the R22, R44, R66 series, but significantly bigger multi-role helicopter, really. And Airbus Helicopters have unveiled their H140, which you'll not be surprised to hear is slightly bigger than a H135 and not quite as big as a H145. But I don't remember the last time we had new helicopters coming out at this sort of rate. But I mean, the H140, 74 sold at the show. So this was an event that took place in Dallas recently, and it seemed like it was really the hub of all helicopter news. So perhaps one to put on the calendar for next year.
And the R88, what was the next smallest gun? R66?
66 was the turbine.
Yeah, how many people in that?
You're asking me now. I want to say 6. It might be 4. I think it's 6. So it's quite a leap up to a 10-seater. Yeah. So certainly the 22 is 2 seats, and the 44 is 4 seats. I've not flown in a 66, but my guess would be 6 seats.
Yeah, okay. There's quite some interesting features on the H140 as well. If you're looking at the pictures here, and that'll be in the magazine, there's actually a T on the tail rotor.
Yes, it's got the fenestron tail, and it's got the T above it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And clamshell doors as well for loading in Kasivac type, Medivac
application for it.
It's clearly sold well.
So, Jack, what about you? What's caught your eye?
Oh, something quite interesting actually. Regent, an American startup, have floated out their Viceroy Sea Glider, which, for those who don't know, is a winging ground effect vehicle, meaning it's using electric motors. It comes out of harbour and then using a hydrofoil wing under the water, goes over the water, and then when increasing speed out at sea, the ground effect forms underneath, meaning it flies a short distance above the.
So this is an Acronoplane. It's an Acronoplane.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's this is an electric vehicle. The first piloted one has been floated out, with the first flight planned for later this year, and lots of applications for it: tourism, transporting coastal areas, Coast Guard functions, supporting oil rigs, and even military functions.
I think we've had this discussion before, haven't we? Is this going to be a pilot's license, or is this a boat skipper's license? What are you going to need for this?
Yeah,
I think it's a maritime one. I think there's a maritime one for wing and ground effects, International Maritime Organisation actually. But all right, yeah, one to keep an eye on anyway.
Yeah.
So back to me, we've had big news, and last week as well, which just as we went to press,
Literally just as we went to press,
Boeing winning NGAD. We now have a new sixth generation fighter announced, F-47.
47, yeah.
Which seemed to have skipped a few numbers somehow. It's sixth generation. It's better than 2, apparently, according to the president. Mach 2 maybe, and there was a couple of sort of like images released. Interesting, looks like it's got canons on it. It does look like some of the renderings, but again, some of it is kept in the shadows, so we don't know exactly what it'll look like or whether it'll be tailless. We're not entirely certain. But I mean, that's a really interesting sort of turnaround, because if you've been following this story, last year the US was really sort of doubtful about NGAD. The cost was one thing, but another thing was rumours there that the threat had changed. They were going to go back to the drawing board. There was people saying, well, they might even cancel it. So something there has changed around. The USAF, I mean, you could tell from the press conference there, the USAF was very, very happy to be announcing that, and to have a future fighter that has already, and they've already been flying it, versions of it for 5 years. So there's classified demonstrators, maybe subscale demonstrators, been flying from, and I presume by that it's been a secret fly-off. Between Boeing and Lockheed Martin. Boeing won it. And the other thing interesting is it's going to be open for export, which people did not think at the time. The assumption was, like F-22, it's not going to be allowed for export. It's been too secret. So
it'll be a toned down version for export.
That's one thing that was said. Yes, is it'll be 10% less effective. We don't know that for certain, but it's interesting. So whether it's something changed there from the economic point of view in looking at the global fighter market and saying we have to. With GCAP and with SCAF, the Franco-German Spanish future fighter, is maybe the US looked at that and they said, actually we have to have some skin in the game here. We're going to get cut out if we go all drones or decide to. So, but anyway,
but that's going to make for a really interesting conversation at our FCAS conference.
It certainly will. And also, we're also hearing news that the US Navy is also set to announce its FA-XX choice. Tomorrow.
Yeah,
tomorrow
as we record
this. So that's going to be the Navy's sixth generation carrier fighter. So two future fighters revealed in the space of 1 week. That's pretty incredible. We've already had earlier this year, late last year, is the J-36 that's popped up, from China. This is all going to be really, really interesting. The FCAS summit. I can't wait to see to hear what people have got to say about this. What else?
Me, I've got an eVTOL story at this time.
Okay.
Joby. Joby have signed a partnership now with Virgin Atlantic to partner on what looks like they're going to be regional connections between cities and airport hubs. So particularly they've talked about Manchester and Heathrow here in the UK. They claim that their eVTOL can take you from Heathrow to Canary Wharf in 8 minutes, something it claims will be 80 minutes by car. I think you've still got to factor in there that getting from the heliport to wherever you want to be.
Yeah.
I'm not yet to be convinced that 8 minutes is accurate, but I think the interesting thing here is that Virgin have previously had an agreement with UK-based Vertical Aerospace. That seems now to no longer be in place. Our good friends at Flight Global have reported that. So Joby seem to have stepped in there to take up the slack. But is this going to be the start of electric vertical takeoff and landing, flying commuter vehicles in the UK?
Well, I mean, if you're involved in the eVTOL space, advanced air mobility, and especially vertiports, you need to read this edition. This not edition of the magazine, because we got a great article on downwash and vertiports, landing pads. We'll get to that later. Jack, how about you?
Oh, there's a space story from me.
Okay.
So, Firefly Aerospace from the US, they successfully sent their Blue Ghost lunar rover to the moon, where which in the process made it the second privately built rover to land on the lunar surface. And here it carried out a series of tests and sent results back to Earth, and it's now entered what's called the monument state. So effectively dormant for the foreseeable future. So could be something of a welcoming committee for the first batch of new astronauts to make it to the moon.
Or aliens. Well, I mean, what's interesting with that is it's part of NASA's commercial push. We're hearing a lot about that anyway. You know, if you think of SpaceX delivering cargo, delivering astronauts to the International Space Station, it's now being pushed out to lunar missions. So, you know, NASA is the a sponsor of that mission. They've got experience on it, but it's a private lander, and it's the way things are now seem to be going there as these private companies are making more strides in exploration and exploitation of the moon. So yeah, interesting. What to watch.
More breaking news again, wasn't it, for you?
More breaking news. Yeah. So again, last week, not only did we have a new fighter, award in the US, but we also had going to press, we had news that Heathrow Airport was shut for 24 hours. So that was a fire at a power substation. The airport completely closed down. Massive disruption, as you might imagine. You know, probably the worst since. The ash cloud, close to UK Air Force, and for a major hub like that to be closed for 24 hours, I mean the knock-on effect. They have seemed to get going quite quickly. I've not heard of any knock-on delays too much this week. Although there was some speculation that the schedules would be affected. But obviously, what's happening now is there's a blame game going on, and people pointing at each other. The power utilities saying it's the airport's fault, the airport saying it's not our fault, etc., etc.
It's just highlighted the vulnerability of our critical national infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And I think also, that's the really interesting thing is with things that are happening in the rest of the world, with geopolitical tensions, with a tanker colliding in the North Sea and various other things, cables being ripped, communication cables. One of the early speculation was, is this some kind of state attack? And this is perhaps how we know sort of like some kind of indications and warnings going on of grey zone hybrid warfare. So yeah, what else?
Net zero for me. Our friend Willie Walsh at IATA has gone on record at a conference in the US to say that he thinks the airlines must revisit their net zero targets. So we're familiar net zero 2050, zero carbon. As Willie Walsh has said, we're not making the progress with SAF that we need to. And he also voiced doubts about the new aircraft technologies that are coming through that we need in place. So new, more efficient wings, whether that's blended body, Airbus's wing of the future, the transonic transbrace wing from Boeing. None of this, in his theory, is going to come through in time to meet these 2050 targets. So he's asked the question: does the airline industry need to be more realistic and admit we're not going to make 2050. And we know Willie Walsh he's very good at putting this argument across. Is this a wake-up call?
Could be. Well, I mean, one interesting thing there is obviously Airbus had their summit earlier this week. Some interesting stuff in there. Good takeaways there is that they're still working on the hydrogen. Still working on zero E. They're not giving it up completely. It's just being sort of delayed. They're waiting for the technology, waiting for
I'm guessing the infrastructure
to evolve, but they haven't given it up. Obviously, Wing of the Future is still there. They're looking at open rotor. They're looking at more efficient wings. That's there. But if you look at the backlogs, 8,000 aircraft in the backlog. So you order an aircraft now, and if you're in the back of the queue, you're going to be waiting, a long time. By the time that comes, that is going to be, an old aircraft, but it's going to be,
and with an in-service date, sort of 20-year lifespan. By 2050, we need to be getting this technology through, don't we?
Yeah. So I mean, that was again, that was nothing that interesting came out of the Airbus summit. Is that they had a whole session on non-CO2. So they're going to do some research on that. Pacific, they're doing a testing on non-CO2. So contrails, basically contrail management. We've read about that before. The RAS has been looking at that for its Greener by Design group and conferences and events, and that seems to be gaining momentum. I think you might sort of argue is we've always argued, it's always been sort of argued is that a quick win, but I think if you're looking at that and going, SAF isn't going to get us there, new technology isn't going to get us there, people are now looking around for other ways and other methods and hang on. There's a way here we could actually make progress. It could be a quick win, and all it does is you adjust your cruising altitude just a little bit by a couple of 100 feet, 1,000 feet or whatever. Still a lot of work to be done. The jury is still out. A lot of it, it's still a kind of a work in progress. But I think people are, it seems to have picked up more momentum now. Globally, now the whole idea of contrail management and non-CO2, and this is a way in which aviation can actually reduce its impact while we wait for SAF to scale up, while we wait for hydrogen to come in, etc., and maybe new airliners. Just a thought. What about you?
So this is on the defence theme. So as countries in Europe look to ramp up their defence spending, Turkey's Baykar have
that's easy for you to say.
Turkey's Baykar have teamed up with Leonardo to form a joint venture to make Baykar's range of drones in Italy. Now it's interesting to see how this fits in with Europe wanting to be more self-sufficient, but also in terms of systems and how this could fit in with the new sixth generation GCAP.
So, I mean, obviously, Baykar are known for the TB2. That got pretty famous in the opening days of the Ukraine-Russian conflict. A lot of sort of news about that, and people were very excited about its capabilities, but it seemed a very capable platform. And then also they've done other drones as well. So I think it's interesting. It's kind of marrying their capabilities in the platforms with Leonardo, which is great for their specialist mission systems, radars, your sensors, and things like that, and putting them together as to here's a package for this increase in European defence spending. And what else have we got?
Just one sad bit of news to finish on. Paddy Hemingway, the last surviving Battle of Britain pilot, has passed away recently, aged 105. Paddy flew both in Battle of France and Battle of Britain, flew Hurricanes with 85 squadrons. So very sad to hear of Paddy's passing. I think I'm right in saying now leaves Colin Bell, our good friend Colin Bell, as the oldest surviving Royal Air Force member. And recently had his 105th birthday party at the RAF Club. I think he's already booked his 106th. So good positive news, Colin. But yeah, sad news there to hear about Paddy.
And it is obviously the 85th anniversary of the Battle of Britain.
Yes.
So, that'll be interesting for air shows this year. If you're out and about in the air show circuit, I'm sure. Look out also for any events that we might be putting on to mark the anniversary.
Yeah.
Very, very sad. It's a link with the past that has finally gone. That particular iconic and so significant air battle that I think informs so much about. Well, it informs, influences, inspires so much of kind of aviation, military aviation at least, anyway.
And particularly on the subject of air shows, Paddy's birthday always fell during React weekend in the middle of July. He was always wished a happy birthday during React, which Sam won't be hearing us anymore.
Yeah. Right, on that news, we're now going to go over to our another segment of the podcast, Specialist Group Insight. We'll see you after the break.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Specialist Group Insight segment. In March, the Flight Ops Group ran a successful conference on single pilot flight operations. And today, I'm joined by my colleague, Captain Robert Scott, for a post-conference chat, which is really our first chance to step back and reflect on the event from last month. This isn't intended to be a session-by-session conference recap, rather just a conversation about how the event landed, what we learned, and where we think the conversation needs to go next. It was a packed agenda with voices from all across the industry, including regulators, manufacturers, researchers, operators, and of course pilots, all in one room. It was quite a good event. We weren't aiming for consensus on the topic. We were aiming for insight, depth, and some perspective. So thank you very much for joining us as we unpack a little bit about what we heard and where we go from here. Robert, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Seth. And as you say, it's the first time we've had a chat since the event. I think it's true to say that we were pleased with the reports that we had. We had a meeting earlier in the week, and it looks as though we hit our targets that were established by the events committee, or the events group rather, within 4HP. Yeah. And they seem quite happy with the way it went as well. So all in all, I think I wouldn't go so far as to say a pat on the back to everybody, but it did seem to go quite well, perhaps a little better than we expected at times.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Looking back, the kind of conversation we were hoping to have at this conference, as I said in the introduction, wasn't necessarily a yay or nay. It was more sort of a balanced conversation, we hoped. And I think we achieved that. I think we got there. I think the conversation was fairly balanced throughout the 2 days. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah. I think if we go back to the beginning of the project, as it were, which was more than 9 months ago now, we made the decision that we were going to have a conference on this subject, which was the good news. The not so good news was, as far as we knew, nobody else had ever done it before.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't a question of, well, we'll just do this, that, and the other, which worked last time, because it wasn't a last time. So we cobbled something together, and then started looking for speakers, and hoped that it would come good in the end. What was interesting right at the beginning, as you probably remember, was that there was quite a reluctance on the part of people we hoped would be speakers to actually get involved. As we know, it's a highly controversial subject, maybe less so now than it was a couple of weeks ago. But we did find that it was actually quite difficult to persuade people to come along and talk to it, particularly as a lot of it was undefined. It was really a question of, well, what are you going to talk about? Because this hasn't actually happened yet within our industry, which actually made it more interesting. And when we did cobble the program together, it actually looked as though it's going to turn out all right. And thanks to the wonderful speakers we had and a reasonable amount of, I think, good planning, it did come good. And I think it was a very rewarding couple of days for everybody who took part.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The turnout was excellent, actually. It certainly exceeded my expectations. We had a mix of people in the conference room itself, and also joining online and submitting questions online, and so on and so forth. So I thought that it was fantastic to see it so well attended. Where did you sense the most alignment in the room and where do you think views kind of were divergent a little bit? I think from my side, I think I felt that we probably agreed across the board that a full-on single pilot operation with a one pilot from takeoff to landing would be a clean sheet design airplane with a new type rating, a new type certificate, a new way of operating. And that didn't appear like it was something that any manufacturer was working on at the moment, at least not that we heard from. And it's probably something that's quite far down the road. So I felt that in the room we were fairly aligned on that idea. But the subject of EMCO, maybe there was a little more misalignment. I felt that there were some parties in the room that thought that was kind of a terrible idea. And then there was other parties in the room that kind of thought, well, maybe it could be seen as a sort of stopgap in the future. Those were two sort of convergent and divergent areas, I think, that I sensed throughout the 2 days myself.
I agree. I think what was quite interesting from my point of view is I got the feeling beforehand, and maybe you did as well, that this whole idea has been driven largely by technology, not surprisingly.
Yeah.
Because, with the remote operations of 31 Squadron and that sort of thing that have actually been around for a long time, we do know that technology works. Now, whether it's transferable to a commercial airspace or not is highly debatable. And in fact, it was debated, and we had a very good presentation on the subject. But I thought what kicked it off rather well was when Sammy gave his keynote.
Yes.
And of course, Sammy is an AI expert, for want of a better expression.
Absolutely.
And I think he set the scene quite well. He more or less said, look, if you're expecting AI to solve all the problems in the world and enable you to do all sorts of strange things you've never been able to do before, then you've got another thing coming.
Yeah.
And I think it was a little bit of a slap in the face for a lot of us, because I think we all thought, wow, we're going to hear about AI and it's going to do wonderful things for us and that sort of thing. But I think that set the tone for the 2 days. Technology was very much a feature, and some of it was quite fascinating. In fact, all of it was. But I think we were, as you rightly say, we were all left at the end of the 2 days with the feeling that, technology on its own is just not going to do this.
Yeah.
There were so many human factors issues that were raised in terms of fatigue and cognitive overload and stuff like that made it really clear that we've still got a very long way to go if we imagine a time when it's, as you say, a purpose-built airplane with room for one pilot.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. And one thing that I quite enjoyed about the format of the conference, which I think a lot of the credit goes to you for, is the different forms of discussion we had. We had some fireside chats, we had the panel discussions, that sort of thing. I think that, and I think we had a panel discussion with Boeing, as well as a panel discussion, fireside chat, I should say, with Boeing and one with Airbus. And I thought that was a great way to sort of bring some of these topics forward in a sort of a more relaxed way. And of course, Frank Chapman, our very own FOG member, hosted, I think he ended up doing both, if I'm not mistaken, in the end. And he did a fantastic job of setting the tone and inviting some of these conversations in.
Yeah, he did. It would be very unfair of us because we have such a wonderful lineup of speakers to pick anybody out in particular. But I have to say, I think we should be particularly grateful to the way the OEMs supported us, Airbus and Boeing, and they both got heavily involved, and they were both very much engaged with everybody else who was present. And I think the whole of the attendance appreciated the fact that we were having support at that level. Yeah. Although in the case of Airbus, of course, they are very much in favor of and proponents of the EMCO concept, unlike Boeing, who are following the FAA thinking on the subject, are really not interested in any form of single pilot or modified pilot operations at this moment in time.
Yeah.
But that all led to really interesting discussions with everybody being involved. So it was really useful.
Yeah, I completely agree. So what do you think the conference contributed to the wider conversation around this concept now? I mean, um, it was a summit really of sorts, wasn't it? Really, it was the first time we've had everyone in the room together to discuss some of these topics. And on day two, we had some labor group representation and things like that come in that had a completely different perspective on things. Do you think we've contributed something to this wider conversation now?
I do.
I think we have. Yeah, I think we've sort of legitimized it in some respects.
Yes, we've got it out in the open where it hasn't
Yeah,
been
yeah,
previously. It's been very much the domain of people working in isolation, like the OEMs or the researchers in the universities.
yeah,
Some really good stuff, and we brought it all together over that 2 days. Everybody had a chance to get involved and speak their piece. Once again, as I said, great encouragement by the OEMs, but also all the other either manufacturers like Honeywell and the universities like Sheffield and Cranfield,
yeah.
and then of course Jens from EASA. I was very pleased with the involvement that we had, and I think we sort of set the tone, if you like, for the question, of course, being, well, where do we go from now? And
Yeah.
I think that we can come up with something which would be seen perhaps as a next step in this conversation. We had a lot of support from the people there, people working at much higher levels than we do
Yeah.
on these subjects. And I'm conceited enough to think that we perhaps could contribute something useful to further discussions within the industry on this.
Well, I completely agree with you. I think that now we've had everyone in the room together and we've gotten a lot of it out there. And of course, the conversations that happen in the networking breaks and things along those lines, we all took lots of notes. And I think there's a lot to bring back to the table now. And I think certainly within our own group, I don't see any reason why we couldn't put out a white paper to the industry later this year that brings a lot of these findings together in a way that's readable for the industry around the world now. And I think it might be the first paper of its kind. Actually, I know there's been different silos out there that have put information out there from their own perspective, but we might be in a position now to put something out there that is non-biased, well researched, and the result of an actual summit on the topic, which I think would be very valuable.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it'd be valuable. And I think it'd be interesting and rewarding to put it together, actually.
Yeah, I quite agree. So hopefully later this year, anyway, we can have something together and have it out there. So
I look forward to reading your working paper on the subject.
I'll get right on it. Excellent. Well, Robert, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of the Flight Ops Group, thanks for all the effort you put into arranging this conference. For those listening, Robert is the chair of our conferences and events committee, which I think actually might be a committee of one within the Flight Ops Group, and really was the driving force behind getting this conference together. And then a little bit later in the process, the society themselves joined in. So we had Mary and Jose and other people get involved and propel this thing into what became a fantastic 2-day conference on the topic. So on behalf of the Flight Ops Group and all of us, thank you very much for everything that you put into it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Sad. Thanks to you for your support. And the small group that we put together did a fantastic job making it a really interesting program and having everybody thoroughly engaged. And I think everybody went home at the end of the 2 days having had a good time.
Yep, I completely agree. Excellent. Well, I'll look forward to that white paper later in the year.
Okay.
And until then, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks very much.
Bye for now.
Talk soon. Yeah, bye.
And welcome back. Okay, so I think you'll find that was a pretty enlightening discussion from the Flight Operations Group again. Great to have them on the podcast. So we're going to look at the April 2025 issue of AEROSPACE. Front cover here. What features have we got in the April 2025 issue? Shall I start?
You start.
So we've got obviously on the military aviation side of things, we've got an article by Professor Keith Hayward, and he's looking at defence decoupling. So it won't have escaped attention that people in Europe and the US seem to be on diverging paths now, and there is real concerns there about the European dependence or reliance on US capabilities, particularly in things like ISR, SEAD, tankers, airlift, space surveillance, and things like that. So this article is really looking at the boost in European defence spending. So the Europeans and European defence now, it has galvanised. As we said last month, Trump's pronouncements have galvanised this effort in European capitals to actually sort this out, boost their defence spending. This seems serious now. There are, massive sums being talked about, and they're talking about investing them into European sovereign capabilities. So, looking at things like that is, European fighters. France is now talking about more Rafale squadrons.
Mm-hmm.
There's people now looking at OneWeb. What can it do to maybe gap fill from Starlink, and all these sort of arguments and kind of implications that previously were purely kind of hypothetical. So that's from Keith Hayward, looking at European defence industry at these sort of changing times. What about you?
Me, well, we spoke in the first half about Willie Walsh talking about the airline industry maybe having to play down its, or perhaps scale back its aspirations for net zero. We, the Royal Aeronautical Society, have recently done a survey called Public Attitudes to the Decarbonisation of Aviation, conducted by Naomi Allen, our Director of Research, in association with Ipsos. And it has had some really interesting results, actually. So you will ask the British public, our audience said. And one crucial one for me is we talked about Willie Walsh on sustainable aviation fuel. When asked about the impact of sustainable aviation fuel, 43% of the people that were asked downplayed the amount of potential emission saving that could be put from SAF. So people, the general public outside of our own arena, they've probably heard about SAF and sustainable aviation. We don't realise potentially how useful this could be.
Right, okay.
But the survey's also looked at lots of other things, and I think the one standout for me is that 75% of respondents reported to be concerned about climate change. We know that.
Okay.
Only 38% of respondents suggested they'd be willing to pay more for their flight to reduce the emissions.
And that's suggested they're willing to be more rather than actually pay more. So I think this is always the problem. And I've heard this before in events and from airline executives and people who basically track kind of ticket sales and stuff like that. And how many people tick the
would you like to pay more to offset that?
Offset, and it's very, very low indeed.
Yeah.
What about you, Jack?
One event that took place during February was the biennial Aero India show in Bengaluru in southern India. And it was quite an interesting show. So on the tarmac, you had both a Su-57 from Russia and a F-35 from the US.
First time the two have been on the same tarmac?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's it was quite a wide-ranging show. So there was lots of concepts presented for Loyal Wingman collaborative combat aircraft, an A400M from the transport sector, and several helicopters. So, but the main thing that came out of it was the appearance of the two fifth-generation aircraft, as the Indian Air Force is still looking to scale up its squadron strength to the mandated number of 42 squadrons.
Right. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we've also had some global space news or global space comment in the April edition. We've got commentary from the head of Bahrain's space agency. They recently had their first fully Bahraini satellite put into orbit, Al Munfa.
Correct.
And that is a Earth observation satellite. But what's interesting with that is it's got AI enabled. So it's AI edge processing. So details are a little bit vague on this, but one of the interesting things there is that if you do the processing in orbit, the satellite therefore can, it's not just taking pictures kind of willy-nilly, but it's actually saying, oh, there's something here you might want to look at a little bit more closely. I've spotted this has changed, come over here, oh, this is, so it's already identifying things, and it's therefore it's doing the processing in orbit, saving time, saving data, and queuing the humans there to kind of, you want to look at this at a little bit more detail, rather than just going swathe of photos and a human analyst having to, or even downloading a whole lot, and then the AI doing it on the ground, because obviously bandwidth is at a premium. So that's quite interesting.
I think the other thing with that is a nice bit of outreach from that is you can actually tune in your amateur radio to the satellite. It will play you the Bahraini national anthem, which again, what a great bit of outreach if you've got kids interested in space. You actually tune in and listen to the satellite speaking back to you.
And just goes to show how many countries are actually involved in producing satellites now, where it used to be to preserve the superpowers.
Yeah.
What else have you got for us, Steve?
An article on TCAS, so traffic collision avoidance systems. So this is from Robert Jocelyn, Dr. Robert Jocelyn, Associate Professor at Embry-Riddle. And obviously, traffic collision, big subject at the moment after the tragic accident in DC at the start of the year. So looking at the past, the present and the future of collision avoidance. So going right the way back to 1956 when there was a mid-air collision over the Grand Canyon, which really prompted the introduction of this technology. And Robert's looked at how it's evolved over the years, and then looking at airborne collision avoidance systems, which is the latest version. It's called ACAS-X. And there are sub-variants. At the moment, a lot of TCAS doesn't necessarily talk to other TCAS systems, whereas ACAS-X, there are sub-variants. So there's active surveillance, there's operational, there's one for uncrewed vehicles, RPAS, and also a passive one, which will be used with general aviation. Just looking at how we can improve things even further than existing TCAS on eyeball.
So presumably the algorithms will be different in each sub-variant of the TCAS, so that two drones coming together, within 100 feet. All right, well that's fine. Two small drones, but two airliners are. That's a conflict.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Jack? You've got something in this month as well, haven't you?
I have. Yeah. I've in January we had a visit at number 4 Hamilton Place from Flyby Technologies, a small Yorkshire-based company here in the UK who. Their main job is training people to operate drones at beyond visual range. But Annalisa Russell-Smith, the chief strategy officer, she gave a lecture on the Jackal UAV they've produced, which is essentially a miniature helicopter with both upwards and downwards forward and backwards and upwards and downwards fans. And this was tested a couple of years ago, firing the Martlet multi-role missile. And talking to me, the founder, John Parker, he was saying about how, as of his background as a former RAF Buccaneer and Tornado pilot, he saw the need for a cheap battle interdiction aircraft, and its flyby is gaining steam nicely with new aircraft to be unveiled this year and next, called the Vandal, a hypersonic vehicle for electronic warfare next year, and this year the Mayhem, which is both a decoy and a cheap cruise missile.
Okay, yeah. So it's in a way the Jackal is a bit like the Baykar TB2 in that kind of sort of close air support, striking columns of tanks and what have you, and then. They're also looking at their kind of low-cost cruise missiles and possibly hypersonic stuff. So, yeah, I mean, a really interesting company to keep track of and to watch at the moment. Another interesting thing we've got in there, and referring to, we'll go back to the Joby, the sort of news, is we've got a great article here with some cutting edge research from Mike Price and Richard Brown from
Well remembered.
So on downwash simulation, downwash modelling, and some really cutting edge sort of research and computer simulation. So helicopters. It's obviously known that if you know helicopters are a bit blowy when you stand underneath them. But what's not known is the patterns of the gusts and the eddies that come out underneath them. And traditionally, it's supposed to it's modelled as a kind of a donut of air that comes down. So don't stand here. If you've been around helicopters, you've probably sort of seen signs saying no loose articles and things like that. And what the modelling, the usual modelling or the usual safety advice is it's usually based around US Marines with full kit, as to standing near ospreys or things like that. So this is kind of cutting edge modelling, and they found out actually it's a lot more dynamic and a lot more complex, and you get a lot more weird and wonderful patterns with the air. What the air does. Than you might expect. So the air will sometimes go backwards. And it's also very difficult to think because you're being buffeted to concentrate, to focus, to write numbers, which was even a surprise. I mean, they did some live trials to inform and back up the computer simulation, standing underneath helicopters, and there were pilots there who said, "Well, I didn't realise that it was this windy." And there were pilots because.
Yeah.
Why would you realise this?
I think a lot of this comes off. There've been a couple of instances, including somebody who passed away about a year or so ago at a hospital heliport, wasn't it? And you say the modelling is based on a military person with all their kits. If you're perhaps a frail little old lady at a heliport, you're going to get blown over a lot quicker.
Yeah. So this is also so while obviously this is the helicopter operators are now very, very interested in this research. There's even probably bigger implications as well for eVTOLs, advanced air mobility, where you've got multiple rotors. There's higher rotor load, higher rotor loading on them, and they've got more complex and more difficult to predict patterns underneath them. So, if you're talking about these new generation of eVTOLs coming in, and you want to have vertiports in urban areas, really useful knowledge to have into how do you plan these things. Where's your waiting area? How far away do you have structures? And things like that, and how do you? And one of the suggestions as well there, and this actually comes from Harrier modelling, was Harrier pilots used to come in and actually dip the nose to put the downwash behind them, and then land. And it kind of cleared out the
So you're not coming in and flaring and putting the jet wash forward. You're actually
there was a little dip there, just and maybe that's something that could be done in software with some of these new eVTOL vehicles to point it down. But one of the problems there is the fly-by-wire software is coming in and you're coming down and they're trying to keep the aircraft as rock solid as possible. The pilot's not doing anything. It's like F-35. They're commanding the thing to just go down. Sort of straight down. So really, really interesting and useful bit of research there on helicopter downwash and eVTOL downwash. So finally, what else we got? There was another space conference. You didn't go to this one. Who else did? We had Solent branch.
We did, members of ours, the Young Persons Committee of our Solent branch, went to the European Space Conference in Brussels recently, and according to their paper, they had a very interesting time. So going around and talking to the key stakeholders, interviewing some very, by the sound of it, quite senior people and just bringing back some messages about how there's a role for everyone in space, whether you're an engineer or a lawyer or anything else. They say that if you've got the passion for it, space can be for you.
I think it's really great to see an article coming in from our Young Persons committees and various branches. I mean, it sounds cliche, but they're the future of what we do. And it's not just the future of the brands, but the future of what we do. So getting young writers into the magazine is really important. It's something I feel very strongly about. So it's a really well-written article, actually.
So if you're a young member, a student member, and you're interested in writing for the magazine, get in touch. Get in touch. Send us your ideas. We're always happy to hear from you. And then obviously we've got Afterburner, our usual roundup of society news. We've got the diary, we've got book reviews, we've got the message from the president.
We've got the president in a jetpack.
Yeah, I think that's probably a first. So President David Chin went flying with Gravity, Take on Gravity, and he went hovering there in a jetpack, just like Iron Man. Well, a couple of 6 inches off the ground, so he had great fun doing that. We had an art royal lecture.
Yeah.
Book review from about Northrop
Grumman. So, and again, if you're from branches, if you'd like to get your stuff into Afterburner, send it in. We're working on the next issue at the moment, so send it across to me. That's Stephen, so Stephen with a PH, Stephen.bridgewater@aerosociety.com. Tell us your news, send some photographs, please, that's really important, and we'll include as much as we can in the next issue of Afterburner for you.
And the other important thing as well there is medals and awards nominations are now live. If you are in a team, if you know of a team, if you are involved in cutting edge research, cutting edge flight test, industry, get in touch. Go to the RAS website, look for medals and awards nominations for the most prestigious awards in aerospace. First people who won the RAS gold medal, Wright brothers.
Yeah.
So we're looking there. The nominations now being considered. And we're looking for things that are really deserve recognition through, aerospace, aviation, spaceflight. So this is your chance to be recognised. Right, so on to upcoming events, shout-outs. Tonight, obviously.
As we record this tonight, it is the Aero Society Lates quiz. Probably a bit late for you to come along, but I'm Quizmaster. I've spent the last couple of days just fine-tuning our 60 questions. So what have we got? So we've got military aviation and civil aviation, space round.
Cheeses.
We've got a round on cheese. Is it cheese or is it an aeroplane? And we've also got a round on bird watching. If you come to the quiz, you'll know what that's all about. Yeah. Maybe I'll give you some questions next month.
Yeah, okay. We've also got the Alan Bristow Memorial Lecture happening next week. So that's going to be on advanced air mobility from Bristow's themselves. So they're busy sort of introducing and trialling some of these new air vehicles. We've got the RPAS conference on 24th of April. That should be really interesting. So on the civil side of drones, Young Professionals panel, that's not online, I think on 30th of April. And then moving on to May, we've got the annual banquet and FCAS Summit. So we've already talked about the FCAS Summit. That is set to be really interesting. We've got the Sustainability Conference in June, and we've also got the Paris Air Show. So the team will be out at the Paris Air Show, coming out at the Paris Air Show, usual Paris Air Show in June. Send us your news, send us your embargoed scoops. We will be there, we'll be looking up there, we'll be hoovering up as much news as possible. What else have we got in air shows?
Well, it's been a bit of an air show roundup. We haven't done this for a couple of months. Big news for me, F-86 Sabre coming across to the UK from France for a bit of a UK tour. So it's doing various events, including Milan Air Fest, one of the old Warden shows at Shuttleworth, and a couple of Duxfords, amongst other things. That's Frederick Ackery with his F-86. Also on tour is an R4D, which is a US Navy version of a C-47 Dakota. That's coming over from the US with the Commemorative Air Force. Was due to come last year, had an engine problem. So undeterred, they're coming back on their own this year, tour around Europe. And just looking at the bigger shows, so RIAT have already confirmed, so this is Royal International Air 2 at Fairford. Finnish F-18, that's going to be fantastic to see. Spanish Typhoon, and a bit of a helifest really. So they've got a Swedish Black Hawk, they've got a Merlin from Portugal, an NH90 from Germany, and a Czech Sokol as well. Ooh. And Cosford have signed up the Swiss PC-17. So here we are, we're not even in April and we're already getting really good, firm, exciting news for the airshow scene ahead.
Brilliant. Okay, well that's one to watch as well. So finally, we're coming to the rounding up to the end of the podcast. We have our usual. What have you been watching, reading, playing? I'm going to start. I'm going to start off. I've been rereading Derek Robinson's classic Piece of Cake, which is absolutely brilliant. It's Battle of France, Battle of Britain, pilots, fiction. But just so good,
I've never read the book, but I have watched the series. And does it differ from the old TV series?
Well, it's a Sound of Hurricanes. So that's they come when they were doing the TV series. They hadn't done any one flyable hurricane. So they did Spitfires for the TV series, but very, very good. Good writing there. Very, very cynical. Caused a lot of ripples when it came out because it sort of portrayed class problems, the fact that there wasn't armor in the armored headrests in the aircraft, and that they didn't take any. They were flying around in Vicks, instead of like the Finger Fours, despite the fact that the Luftwaffe had been flying around in Finger Fours in Spain. Yeah. A whole load of problems, and war is a sort of a continual series of cock-ups.
Yeah. Does Moggy still fly under the bridge?
He still flies under the bridge, yes. So, but Piece of Cake, classic piece of writing, and if you haven't read it, why not? Yeah, what about you?
Me? I've got a prop.
You've got a prop.
I've been reading Blériot to Spitfire, which is the latest book from the Shuttleworth collection. I talk about the Shuttleworth collection, Old Warden, a lot in our podcast. It's a big favourite of mine. This was a book which was originally published in the 70s and has been brought up to date, but kept some of the original story. So this is from the cockpit articles about the aircraft which are flown at the Shuttleworth collection. So everything from their Blériot, original 1909 Blériot, 1911 Blackburn monoplane, through to, this is our Spitfire, and the more modern aircraft. Some of them are the original reports, so you've got the likes of Rolly Beaumont, you've got David Ogilvy, Neil Williams, real luminaries of the airshow world and historic aircraft world of the past. But then some of them have been written by some of the current pilots, such as Scott Butler. So Scott's actually edited the book as well, done a fantastic job. Stu Goldspeak in there. Illustrated with fantastic pictures from the likes of Darren Harbour and Nick Blacko. So that is my tip of the month. Just really, so 36 aircraft listed in there, and it gives you that real insight into what it's like to fly some of these aircraft. And I think it was Neil Williams who talks about flying the Bristol Boxkite, and said that it's very difficult to get into the aircraft. In his opinion, it should be made impossible because it's so awful to fly.
Well, I once went to, I think it was the University of Liverpool, where they've got a high fidelity simulator there, and for an anniversary of, I think it was Reims, the Reims Air Races, is they had a Blériot, a high fidelity model of the Blériot put in, and I think there was an easy mode, and then there's the hard mode.
Yeah.
And I had to go the hard mode, and it's like, how on earth did you fly this thing? And people do records in it. How on earth were you it's just, it was scarily difficult, and having had a taster of that, it was like, gosh,
So this book just puts you in the cockpit, and you get that, and beautifully written as well. Not just from Neil Williams, who we know is a great writer of his day, but also the more modern articles as well. Really, really well written, a really enjoyable book.
I'm going to have to get to Shuttleworth this year and catch up with some of these classic aircraft. From classic aircraft to what, helicopters?
That's right, yeah, US Marine Corps helicopters.
So you were reading...
listening to Ghosts of Baghdad by Colonel Eric Barr from the US Marine Corps. It's a very interesting book. It's about the opening days of the Iraq War in 2003, when his squadron was flying off the USS Saipan. And it talks all through about how the Super Cobras, as they were then, engaged the enemy. It was also a very eye-opening part where he's attached to the British Army and seeing the British Army and its quirks and traditions from an American perspective.
Okay, helicopter gunships. Right, fantastic. So, we're coming to the end of the podcast now. Where can people keep up with us?
Me, I'm mostly on Facebook and LinkedIn. You'll find me as Stephen with a PH, Stephen Bridgewater, both on LinkedIn and on Facebook.
Jack?
I'm on X at RAES Jack R.
And Tony doesn't post very often because he's got to look at his handle up.
And from somebody who doesn't post very often to Tim Robinson.
Yeah, Orius Tim R. I'm still on X. I'm on Blue Sky as well. Views, questions, feedback, please do send them in. Tell us what you like about this, the episode. Reminder, we're also on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes. All good. We're on Podbean now. So we're on more and more things. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like.
And YouTube.
And YouTube, obviously. And so that's a wrap for this episode of NOTAM. And we'd also like to thank, again, Lockheed Martin for their support in driving aerospace innovation forward here in the UK and allied militaries around the world. To explore their latest advancements and industry insights, visit lockheedmartin.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next month.
See you next month.
Thank you.